It wasn't just a dummy, it was a mirror twisted, cracked, and far too convincing. When Magic was released in 1978, it quietly slipped into theaters like a whisper that knew too much. Starring Anthony Hopkins in one of his most disturbing pre-Silence of the Lambs roles, the film was packaged as a psychological thriller, but what audiences witnessed was something far less comfortable and far more real. The story of Corky, a ventriloquist whose mind unravels through his relationship with a foul-mouthed dummy named Fats, became less about the tricks of the trade and more about the cost of surrendering to a voice that isn't yours. Behind the curtain, strange things happened, not the kind of stories you'd hear in press junkets or glossy interviews. The kind that lingered in hotel rooms, on empty sound stages, and in the eyes of actors long after the cameras stopped rolling. Some say Hopkins lost time on set. Others recall crew members who refused to be alone with the dummy. Fats wasn't animatronic, but somehow he always felt alive. What was it about Magic that left such a long shadow? Was it the script that cut too deep? The performance that went too far? Or was it something about that wooden face that made people forget it was carved and painted? These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Magic. 1978. A film where the scariest moments weren't scripted, and the most dangerous dialogue wasn't written for a human. Fact 1. The opening scene was meant to fail. The first time audiences see Corky perform, it's awkward, mumbled, and falls flat. What most viewers didn't realize, that scene wasn't acting, it was reality. Director Richard Attenborough insisted Anthony Hopkins perform live magic on set, with no cuts and no script. Hopkins, already nervous about the role, stumbled through the performance exactly as seen on screen. The intention was clear: show a man unraveling before he even begins. But Hopkins later admitted in interviews that the scene felt painfully close to a real-life memory of freezing during an audition early in his career. Attenborough, who witnessed that breakdown, used it to his advantage. He told the crew not to comfort Hopkins after the scene, allowing the actor to sit in that discomfort. This moment of real vulnerability became the cornerstone of Corky's character, a man defined not by control, but by the slow, agonizing loss of it. It begs the question, was this brilliant direction or emotional manipulation disguised as art? Fact 2. Hopkins wasn't acting in the mirror scene. There's a moment early in Magic where Corky stares into a mirror, practicing his act with Fats. His expression flickers like he's unsure who's really speaking. That scene wasn't planned. Hopkins asked for the camera to keep rolling between takes, and what the crew captured was an unscripted conversation between actor and puppet. He spoke to Fats in a voice that shifted subtly between himself and the dummy. The makeup team, watching from monitors, later claimed they couldn't tell when the transition happened. One assistant whispered, "It felt like a possession." The scene made it into the final cut with only minor edits. Attenborough called it the most honest moment in the entire film. Hopkins, on the other hand, refused to watch it back. If the character was losing himself to the puppet, was the actor any safer? Fact 3. Fats had his own room on set. It wasn't a joke. During the first week of shooting, the production crew assigned a private dressing room not to Anthony Hopkins but to Fats. The decision wasn't made for laughs. It was protocol. Hopkins had asked the crew not to treat the dummy like a prop. He insisted Fats be transported, stored, and respected like a living co-star. The idea came from an acting coach who once told Hopkins to treat the illusion like reality until it becomes dangerous. Some thought he was joking. Others weren't so sure. Soon, Fats had a nameplate, a wardrobe schedule, even a stand-in lighting double. What began as a method acting quirk turned into a set-wide unease. Crew members refused to be alone in the room with the dummy. Several claimed they heard knocking sounds from inside after hours. And when a producer tried to remove Fats from the call sheet to save time, Hopkins didn't argue. But the next day, Fats was found seated on the director's chair facing the crew, as if waiting. Was it a prank? Or had everyone already begun treating him as more than wood and fabric? Fact Materta, the telepathic scene, came from a real incident. One of the first signs that Fats might not just be a puppet comes during a scene where Corky appears to respond to questions before they're asked, as if Fats knows what people are thinking. It plays like ventriloquism but lands like telepathy. What's unsettling is that this sequence wasn't in the original script. According to crew notes, it was inspired by a lunch break where Hopkins, still in character, began answering questions a second before cast members could finish speaking. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence. Then it kept happening. Director Richard Attenborough rewrote the dinner scene that night to reflect what he called Hopkins' eerie sync with the role. The actor denied any trickery, saying only, "I was just listening really hard." The scene became one of the most quietly disturbing in the film. And the question it raises still lingers. When does deep listening become something else entirely? Fact 5. The camera operator asked to switch jobs after a single take. There's a scene early in the second act where Fats turns to Corky and whispers something cruel, too cruel for a puppet. It's shot in a tight close-up, the kind that forces viewers to watch every twitch of Hopkins' expression. What isn't obvious is what happened behind the lens. The camera operator on that take, an industry veteran with over 30 films to his name, reportedly stepped away afterward and requested reassignment. He told the assistant director, "I don't know what I just filmed, but it didn't feel like acting." He was replaced quietly the next day. No one spoke about it openly, but his note to the crew was left taped on the monitor cart. "Don't blink during the takes. He might not come back." Whether it was performance intensity or something stranger, one thing was clear: this was not a comfortable production. Fact 6. Anne-Margaret refused to rehearse certain scenes alone. When Anne-Margaret signed on to play Peggy, the love interest from Corky's past, she was told magic would be psychological but elegant. But by the second week of filming, she set a new boundary: no rehearsals unless a full crew was present. The reason? Fats. According to production memos, she was disturbed by how often the puppet responded between rehearsals, even when no lines were being read. In one instance, she was rehearsing a romantic monologue with Hopkins off-set. Fats sat nearby, and when she finished, the dummy, supposedly unpowered, toppled off his chair. Stagehands insisted it was a draft. She didn't believe them. Anne-Margaret later told a friend, "There were 3 people in the room, me, Tony, and the thing we were all pretending wasn't real." Some roles require chemistry. This one demanded superstition. Fact 7. The first violent outburst was shot in one take and left everyone shaken. There's a pivotal scene where Corky, breaking under pressure, yells at his agent in a voice that isn't quite his own. It's the first moment the audience witnesses a full takeover by Fats, and it was shot in a single, uninterrupted take. Hopkins had warned the crew not to cue him. He wanted the emotions to rise organically, and he told the director, "If I go too far, just let me." What followed was a violent, spitting monologue that left the sound engineer in tears and the script supervisor forgetting to mark the scene. No one called cut. The silence afterward stretched nearly a minute before Attenborough stepped in. The monologue was trimmed for pacing in the final edit, but the raw footage, according to insiders, was unusable, only because no one remembered to slate it. It didn't matter. No one wanted to see it again. Did Hopkins lose control, or did he hand it over? Fact 8. Burgess Meredith refused to do ADR, and no one pushed back. Veteran actor Burgess Meredith, who played Corky's agent Ben Green, was known for being professional. But after filming wrapped, when called in for routine dialogue replacement, ADR, Meredith reportedly declined. The reason? "I already said what I needed to say." Crew members assumed it was scheduling, but Attenborough later revealed the truth. Meredith found the scenes too disturbing to revisit. He believed the film had captured something better left untouched. Producers didn't argue. Instead, they adjusted the sound mix to accommodate his original take's imperfections and all. For a man who once boxed with Rocky, it says something that his final fight on film was with a puppet, and he wanted no rematch. Fact 9. Hopkins started referring to himself in the third person. By the third week of shooting, subtle changes in Hopkins' behavior were noted by crew. He stopped using "I" in interviews or between takes. Instead, he'd say things like, "Corky wouldn't like that," or "He doesn't think she's safe." At first, it was dismissed as method acting, but the shift deepened. One night at dinner with Attenborough, Hopkins reportedly kept an empty chair between them reserved, he said, for Fats. Even the makeup department, who saw him daily, noted a peculiar dissociation. "It wasn't a performance," one artist said. "It was like living with twins." Hopkins eventually took a break after the film wrapped and didn't work for several months. He later claimed it was just fatigue, but in private, he described the experience as sharing your head with someone who doesn't knock before entering. It wasn't clear if he meant Corky or Fats. Fact 10. The lake scene had to be reshot, but only for one reason: the dummy wouldn't sink. In one of the film's eerie sequences, Corky considers throwing Fats into the lake a symbolic act of severing control. The puppet resists, not literally, but through Corky's mounting hesitation. It's a turning point, both narratively and psychologically. What most people don't know is that the scene had to be reshot multiple times, not because of Hopkins, but because Fats kept resurfacing. Despite being weighted, the puppet refused to stay submerged. Crew members added more ballast, adjusted the angles, even tried tethering him below water. Nothing worked. Fats floated back up, bobbing with a smirk the makeup team had unintentionally given him. Attenborough eventually rewrote the scene to end ambiguously, leaving Fats above water, as if refusing to be discarded. Was it a technical error, or the storytelling itself? Fact 11. Crew members refused to stay on set after midnight. Night shoots are standard in film production, but after a few intense weeks on Magic, the night crew began to push back, not for union reasons, but for something stranger. Reports circulated of Fats moving slightly between takes. Chalk it up to shadows, memory, or overwork. But multiple crew members claimed they saw the dummy shift its head ever so slightly always, when no one was looking directly at it. One grip left early without explanation. A lighting tech refused to work unless the puppet was secured and locked down. Eventually, an unwritten rule formed: wrap by midnight. Not for safety, for sanity. No official incident was logged, but call sheets quietly began noting no puppet activity after 11:30 p.m. because some props don't need power to feel alive. Fact 12. The fight scene had to be re-choreographed because Hopkins kept blocking himself. During a moment of total breakdown, Corky lashes out in a physical confrontation, arguably with Fats, arguably with himself. The scene was designed to be chaotic, but Hopkins made it nearly impossible to shoot. Choreographers found that he would instinctively counter his own movements, dodging blows he wasn't supposed to avoid and reacting before cues were given. It was as if two minds were rehearsing in the same body. The director pulled him aside and asked if he was over-preparing. Hopkins reportedly smiled and said, "I'm not preparing, we're improvising." The phrasing disturbed more than one witness. The fight was eventually redesigned so that Hopkins could lose to the puppet symbolically, but also physically. In the final edit, Corky appears battered, defeated, and breathless. But what was left out was the take where he collapsed laughing, then crying, then silent. The question remains: who was winning and who was letting him? Fact Shalosh Asara. The Fats monologue was too long, but no one stopped it. In one of the film's most haunting sequences, Fats delivers an uninterrupted monologue about loyalty, betrayal, and control. It was meant to be a brief, sharp exchange, but Hopkins, channeling both Corky and Fats, went on for nearly 8 minutes. No one interrupted. The crew watched as his voice alternated seamlessly, one calm, one frenzied. He never broke eye contact with the dummy. The boom mic operator's hands were visibly trembling. When the scene finally ended, there was no applause, just silence. Attenborough didn't use the full take. It was too intense, too raw. But he kept the tail end, the moment where Corky whispers, "He's always right." The chilling part? That line wasn't in the script. Fact 14. The sound designer inserted whispers, then claimed he didn't. Many viewers of Magic report hearing faint whispers layered under certain scenes, especially when Corky is alone. These aren't listed in the script, nor are they present in early audio logs. When asked, the lead sound designer denied adding them. In fact, he claimed he tried to remove what he thought were audio artifacts, only to find they reappeared in the final mix. Some believed it was a fault in the studio's magnetic tape system. Others weren't so sure. One engineer played a cleaned-up version of the scene in reverse and reportedly heard a single, clear phrase, "Don't leave me." The studio dismissed it as coincidence, but the editing room wasn't used for weeks afterward. Was it sound design or something the film captured unintentionally? Fact 15. The blood was real and no one could prove whose. During a violent sequence late in the film, Corky strikes out in desperation. The scene was choreographed, padded, and set up with fake blood capsules. But when the cameras rolled, something unexpected happened. Real blood hit the floor. At first, it was assumed someone had mistimed a squib, but all the actors were clean. All effects were accounted for. No one was injured, and yet the blood was real, confirmed by on-set medics. The production paused, searched the area, checked everyone. Nothing. The set was cleaned, the footage reviewed, and the incident quietly buried. The footage was used. The scene is still in the film. The line Hopkins delivered just before the strike? "He warned you." Fact 16. Hopkins requested that Fats be kept out of his trailer. As the final weeks of filming approached, cast and crew noticed a change in Hopkins, not in his performance, but in his offset behavior. He became withdrawn, quieter, more controlled. One morning, he left a handwritten note on his trailer door. "Do not place Fats inside, even for fun." No one had, or at least, no one admitted to it. The note stayed up until production ended. When asked, Hopkins simply replied, "He doesn't like being joked about." One PA confessed that earlier in the shoot, someone had indeed placed the dummy in Hopkins' chair as a prank. That PA quit a week later, no explanation given. Was it just method acting taken too far? Or did the actor sense something others refused to acknowledge? Fact 17. The final scene had two versions, only one was shown. The ending of Magic is ambiguous, tragic, and deeply unsettling. But what most don't know is that it was originally shot two different ways. In the first version, Corky speaks through Fats one last time before collapsing, leaving the audience with no doubt who was in control. In the second, Fats continues speaking even after Corky stops breathing. The second version was never released. Studio executives reportedly found it too upsetting, with test audiences reacting viscerally. One viewer reportedly left the screening muttering, "He's still alive in there." That cut remains unreleased, rumored to be stored in a locked vault under the studio's original print archive. The question is, whose voice are we really hearing at the end? Fact 18. The dummy was destroyed, but pieces kept turning up. After filming wrapped, the production team made a ceremonial decision to destroy Fats. It wasn't Superstition, they claimed it was about closure. The dummy was disassembled, burned, and the ashes scattered in a private location. And yet, pieces resurfaced. A jaw hinge matching Fats' design appeared at a prop auction in 1983. A hand was found mislabeled in a studio archive. Most disturbing of all, a glass eye identical to the ones used for Fats was discovered in Hopkins' personal effects years later during a museum exhibit. He claimed not to remember how it got there. To this day, no one can verify how these fragments survived. It leads to one final question. Can you truly destroy something that never acted like a prop in the first place? Fact 19. Hopkins refused to discuss the film for over a decade. After the release of Magic, Anthony Hopkins gave several brief interviews praising the script and his co-stars. But then, silence. For more than 10 years, he refused to talk about the film in public. When asked, he would redirect the question or offer a vague compliment about Attenborough's direction. In a 1989 profile, a journalist pushed further, asking what Hopkins remembered most about Magic. His reply was short: "It worked, maybe too well." Privately, some colleagues claimed he regretted how deeply he immersed himself in Corky. Others said it wasn't the character he feared revisiting, but the space he entered to portray him. Unlike The Silence of the Lambs, which he discussed openly and often, Magic remained the one performance he never revisited, almost like it wasn't just a role, but a door he chose not to reopen. Fact 20. The film's tagline was changed to hide a controversy. The original promotional tagline for Magic read, "You won't believe what he says, and neither will he." It was clever, haunting, and quickly pulled from posters. According to internal memos from the marketing team, early focus groups reacted strongly, claiming the line implied not just mental illness, but possession. Religious organizations threatened boycotts, while some distributors worried about demonic undertone. The studio quietly replaced it with a blander version, a terrifying love story. But the controversy didn't die. In fact, it fueled rumors that the film had been edited post-production to remove scenes deemed too disturbing or spiritually suggestive. To this day, no extended cut has ever surfaced, but fans still search for traces of the version that, according to a few insiders, was never supposed to be seen, but might still exist. Bonus fact. Fats spoke one last time off camera. After filming wrapped, the dummy was packed away in storage for inventory. It was meant to be routine, a few final photographs, a tag, a box. But before the crew sealed the crate, someone decided to take a Polaroid for record keeping. The image, stored with the props department, shows Fats sitting upright in a folding chair, staring directly at the lens. Nothing unusual except the note taped to the back of the photo. It read, "He said thank you." The handwriting matched a junior assistant's. When questioned later, he claimed he'd been alone, organizing props, when he thought he heard someone behind him. A whisper, soft but distinct. "Thank you." There was no one there, just the dummy, unpowered, mouth closed. He quit the following week. The Polaroid disappeared years later during a studio reorganization. The assistant? He never worked in film again. Some say it was a prank. Others insist it was imagination. But those who were there don't laugh when they talk about it. They just pause. So now you've seen what the cameras captured and what they tried to leave out. Was Magic simply a brilliant psychological thriller, or did it tap into something far less explainable? Was Fats ever truly just a puppet? Tell us which fact unsettled you the most, and what other forgotten films we should bring back into the light. Because sometimes the things we leave buried are the ones that never stay quiet.